Hello, and welcome to the first Birkbeck Connections video interview. Birkbeck Connections in organisational psychology is an initiative that Joe and I have set up, which aims to bring together our professional community to connect, to share the latest evidence, and to learn from each other. What we're doing is we're inviting academics, current students at Birkbeck, and actually anyone that has an interest or a passion for the area of organisational psychology to come and join us. When possible, we're going to be running quarterly networking series when we'll get together with key themes and discuss them face to face. For the moment, though, what we thought we would do is take this opportunity to curate a short interview series. What we're going to do is focus on some particularly pertinent research and experience from members of the Department of Organisational Psychology here at Birkbeck. So today it's Joe and I, and today we're going to be talking about what we see as the opportunities arriving from the COVID-19 pandemic, and those opportunities for healthier, more inclusive and more productive working.
And Rachel and I, for those of you who don't know us, we have dual careers as academics and practitioners. We joined the Department of Organisational Psychology at Birkbeck last year to establish the professional doctorate in organisational psychology, and it's been a fantastic journey. And outside of that role, we also run our consultancy, Affinity Health at Work, and we job share in both roles, so it allows us to have the best of research and the best of practice. Through all of our work, we focus on health at work and trying to improve health and well-being in the workplace and people's working lives. But also through the doctorate, we've had the fortunate opportunity to really see the breadth of topics and theories within our field, which has been such an honour, and we look forward to sharing those with you over the coming years as well. One of the key drivers of this work is really evidence-based and need-led research, but also translating key research into usable practical resources and interventions so that we can really promote evidence-based practice within our field.
So getting on to what we're talking about today, clearly the pandemic has had a catastrophic effect on many organisations. But Joe, do you think it is possible for us to look at the future of working lives with optimism?
I think there are a number of things that are going to be a huge challenge in the years ahead. But I also think that if we are sensible and take a pause to really work out how we move forward, there are a number of things that we could really benefit from and change the way that we're working. The first thing I think is this focus on well-being. So it has been, I think, unfortunate that it's taken the pandemic to raise the profile of mental health. But what we see from a number of our clients within the newspapers, within research, that mental health is really firmly on the agenda. And it looks as if it is going to be a significant problem for people moving forward, and therefore is going to require galvanized action. I think what has been wonderful is that we've really seen support focusing on how to educate and encourage people to look after their own well-being. So bringing towards the 5 ways of well-being, so focusing on healthy lifestyle choices. But also organisations, small and large, have really been thinking about how they discuss mental health and including those checks with individuals that they're working with over the while. So definitely see a reduction in stigma and everything moving in the right direction. But I think it'll be really important that now we take stock and we think about, well, how do we start to prevent these things? How do we do more around good job design? How do we manage workload, control, demands? But also, how do we manage change over the coming time? So we're going to have a wave of redundancies, most likely, unfortunately. How do we manage that in a compassionate way, but also support those people who are staying in the workplace? And how do we support teams and line managers in their roles to ensure that they have a supportive environment, but also have tools and resources to do the work that they need to do?
think that theme of job design is really important, isn't it? I think that, and with the job design, I think this leads to the second opportunity that I see, or the second theme, and I think that's around flexible working. So what we saw before pandemic is all the research showed that the vast majority of employees wanted flexible working. And by flexible working, I'm not just meaning remote working, I'm meaning all manner of flexible working. So part-time working, job share, compressed hours, and the whole remit of that. But often flexible working was seen as a perk for a few, and many were seeing it as being an opportunity for offered to perhaps professionals and not offered to other people. What the pandemic has forced is that flexible working is now can't be seen as a perk. It's seen as a necessity, and I hope that therefore it's going to be seen as a viable working option going forward. And more than that, seen as something that is necessary for a sustainable future of organisations, because we don't know when this is going to happen again, be it second wave or a new pandemic happening. And so I think there's this opportunity to provide people with flexible working and be able to enable them to satisfy their working needs as well as their home and social needs will be really important. I think there are some pitfalls with that and difficulties. Jo, you've done some work in the construction industry, haven't you, looking at perhaps the difficulties of organising flexible working?
Absolutely, and I think both the work that we've done with organisations trying to implement flexible working in challenging situations, but also work that we've done with the CIPD, looking at how flexible work is embraced and embedded, really shows that there can be significant benefits for individuals, both in terms of their health and well-being, and the opportunity it affords them to do things like go for a run in the morning. That's certainly something that I've been trying to do most days when we've been here. So it can help people change the way that they integrate their life and take up different practices, but it doesn't work for everybody. And I think it also places a significant role on the line manager, who is then juggling different needs, different hours of working. And then sometimes as we progress back into the office place, we're likely to have really distributed teams where we have some people in the office and some people outside, and that's likely to be a challenge. So we need to make sure we're supporting the managers as they manage their flexible teams, and also remembering to set up our offices at home in an effective way, because that is also going to lead to a musculoskeletal epidemic if we don't make sure that our workers have a good setup at home.
Something we've already seen in research coming through during the pandemic is autonomy being one of those key things that we're feeling more of and recognising more of. And so it's being able to continue to harness that autonomy and give that empowerment to individuals. And I think, as Jo's been touching on in the leadership and management sphere, I think this idea of managers being able to extend that and empower employees. Many of them have had to, because suddenly they're having to work in situations where their employees aren't with them, their team is remote, and so just by nature they're being forced to be more empowering, they're forced to essentially distribute their leadership and be able to delegate a bit more. And I think that has real positives for how that might enable employees. We've done a lot of work over the years looking at the link between manager behaviour and stress in employees. Stress and engagement have actually many positive wellbeing outcomes. And what we've found is that empowering leadership is absolutely important for that, as well as many other things such as being open, such as taking an individual approach, meaning that you have to get to know team members one to one, and being authentic, so showing a bit of yourself. One of the things that this time has meant is that it's really hard not to show a bit of yourself, isn't it? In terms of we've all had to show our backgrounds. Me showing my spare room at the moment. Jo's looking much nicer than mine. but we've all had to kind of show in examples of the way we live. We've all had experiences where we've had children or dogs or doorbells ring when we're in work calls or phones. So that's having that social connection and feel and expanding that is also, I think, a key theme that we're going to look at.
Absolutely, and I think that link of balancing the social connection. So we're going to lose our water cooler conversations. We're going to lose some of those serendipitous opportunities to meet people in our workplace. The longer that we're working remotely, the longer that we're working in different ways and at a social distance. And so thinking about how we can embed those in different ways is really important. And linking to that, I think it's really vital that we provide our managers with those key skills. So not to expect that they will know how to do that and or feel comfortable in doing it, but really important that they are equipped with the tools and the resources and the skills to have difficult conversations, to identify what might be going on, and also to take on that conversation to see what support their team needs. So I think there's lots of things that organisations can do to capitalise on the opportunities that lie ahead. And so in summary, I suppose there's maybe 2 or 3 things that we could really hook onto, aren't there, in taking this forward?
So I think one of the things that we can say in terms of take-home messages, in terms of what organisations might do or focus on, kind of look at it in terms of these 3 psychological needs or basic psychological needs. So we've got autonomy, which is A, we've got belongingness, B, and we've got competence, which is C. So the first, autonomy, how do we continue to make sure post-pandemic that we keep extending this autonomy to employees? How do we make sure that we've got really clear and clear policies and practices around flexible working? How do we, as Jo says, give managers and employees these skills, resources and frameworks for them to be able to support employees appropriately? So I think this autonomy is really key in terms of take home. The second is B, and that's belonging. So how do we how do we sustain this feeling of belonging? One of the things we've found is that although remote working generally is associated with increased levels of isolation, what we've found during the pandemic is that there are glimpses of positivity here, that people have, because they've had to, developed new and interesting ways of coping. So people are sharing more in their remote working than they might normally. So how do we keep this belonging and keep this feeling of inclusiveness? So keep it from an individual level in terms of perhaps having mentoring, having buddying systems. How do we keep it from an organisational sense? So we've seen organisations coming together. We've seen departments in organisations coming together and not working in such a siloed way. So how do we keep on fostering that sense of belonging for people? And then finally, the competence, which is the C. So thinking about, by the empowerment we've enabled, people have been able to feel more confident. We've been seeing practices becoming more innovative, people prepared to take decisions more. And how do we continue to enable this and do that within an open and compassionate and empowering organisational culture?
I think, and that note around silos, I think, is so important for us to think about as well. So when we look at the evidence base that we have and the way that we tend to intervene, we tend to take issues on their own, don't we? And we take quite a siloed approach. So I will support the employee, or I will look at manager training. And we've been working much more recently with the IGLU approach. So the IGLU stands for the individual, the group, the leader, the organization, and then the outside context. And when we think about what resources are needed from all of those different levels, we can address problems in a really different way. So providing somebody with mental health or resilience training is not going to be the solution if they don't have group networks, if they have poor leadership. if the policies aren't clear. So we need to make sure that we're addressing the big picture and looking at a whole systems approach if we really want to drive things forward. And I think that then leads to that final point about what an opportunity for us to really harness the evidence that we have, but also look at how we perhaps gather evidence in a more constructive and consistent way. So we have quite a lot of good work that we can draw on in terms of understanding what the pros and cons are of remote working, of flexible working. But when we've done evidence reviews, we can see there are significant gaps, aren't there? And certainly opportunities for us to better synthesize what's going on and really understand how we can make sure we create an inclusive environment by knowing what works for who and which groups in what ways as we move forward.
So we think the future could be bright. We're looking forward to hearing and seeing what will happen. If anybody reading this has any opportunities or suggestions, please do contact us. We're going to share some relevant publications at the end of this podcast, so you should see it. Do join us next week for our next interview, and that's going to be with Professor Almut McDowell talking about the future of work. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Thank you and goodbye.
Goodbye.